Okay, well, good morning, everybody. We had a really good level of interest in KeyPost, so very grateful that you can all spend some time with me giving this presentation. My aim today is to give you a good overview of KeyPost and what it can do, and then I'll give you a bit of a live presentation, and then we'll open up for questions. So just starting really with the product, what is it? But I need to introduce myself first of all. So my name is Will Barron. I know a lot of you will already know me. You can see my email address there. Do feel free to contact me via email or on the phone number if you have any further thoughts or queries about the product. So first thing, we just sort of think about what is KeyPost? Well, it stands alone. It doesn't need AutoCAD. It is a fully featured design tool for the structural side of your sign installations, and it comes with its own graphical drawing interface. So it doesn't need AutoCAD at all. It can automatically suggest posts and foundations, but you may want to test an existing structure. You may want to set up a structure that you have on site already. Perhaps you're putting up a new sign, maybe replacing one of those old blue bordered signs. So there is a feature where you can just drag and drop various different elements onto the drawing canvas, the drawing area. Now, of course, as you'd expect, it's been scrutinized. It is accredited by the British Standards Institute. They are one of the notified bodies in the area that audit both the manufacturers, the suppliers of signs and posts, and also those who supply software for calculating the structural design characteristics. So the first thing really is it does provide this interface with KeySIGN. Now, this is really not always necessary. KeyPost has been designed to work in a standalone way without KeySIGN, without the AutoCAD side of things. So if you just have a rectangular sign, you can just input the width and height of the sign. But for those peculiarly shaped signs like the town boundary signs or these ones that support traffic calming measures, perhaps where you've got a 20-mile-an-hour speed roundel poking out the top, a small semicircle out the top of the sign, that geometry is exported directly from KeySIGN, from the CAD environment. So it does mean that you aren't approximating to a rectangle. So any shape, of course, but multiple signs too. So one thing we spotted on our travels, a series of signs that not far from the office here in Stratford-upon-Avon. Couldn't help but try and model this within KeyPost. It isn't really a recommended assembly of signs there. There are rather too many destinations for the drivers to pick up. We couldn't help ourselves take a photo of that kind of interesting arrangement and see if we couldn't model that within KeyPost. So it's just a little snapshot there of KeyPost. You can see the ground in brown below there with the foundation in it and the two posts poking up with all those signs sitting on those two posts. So the software will calculate the post and foundation requirements of any installation, whether that be something that you've modeled by moving your signs and posts around, or whether it is something that it has suggested for you. And there are a range of graphic design tools to test the installations as well, if you wanted to move them around. Now, very importantly as well, it does include a very comprehensive and fully transparent report, and as you'd expect, it does comply with all sorts of structural, geotechnical and building design standards, particularly wind loading from BSEN 12899 Part 1, the May 2013 edition, but more importantly, Eurocode 1. Now, Eurocode 1 is just a shorthand for another long, conventionally named there, Harmonized European Standards. It's BSEN 1991-1 Part 4, which is wind actions on structures. Eurocode 1 is actions on structures. But there are other Eurocodes to do with geotechnics and concrete design and building design standards, and indeed street lighting standards are invoked where you're looking at planted foundations. Passive safety, obviously very important. It doesn't affect the structural performance, but it is important if you have passively safe posts that their structural characteristics are also calculated too. And of course, concrete standards and other material standards such as steel and aluminium are very important as well. So there are these two elements to it. You can either ask the auto post feature of KeyPost to suggest some arrangements, so it will automatically suggest suitable designs, or we can actually test some designs that we try as well. And we use this traffic light system to give an easy visual check of the suitability of any structural arrangement. So here on your screens you should see a little montage. So we've got the main KeyPost window behind there with an arrangement of signs. So we've got a giveaway sign on the back there. We can just see the reverse of that, the sort of the grey corners poking out behind the roundel there. And on the show to drivers on the main road, we have a no motor vehicles except for access sign with the 30 limit there. Now this has actually been modelled to be in a slope, but the regulatory signs themselves will need to have a wide base post to provide for the electrics. On the right hand side we've got the auto post feature with a selection of posts, and at the bottom a grid of possible results. So there are a number of different results that KeyPost has suggested from which you can select depending on the arrangement that you require. So it is possible to test what-if scenarios. You might have an existing structure and you might want to test what happens to the bending of the support or the ability of the soil to resist overturning if an additional sign or a larger sign is placed on an existing structure. So it's very easy to model those if you know the arrangements that were installed. I did mention there's a very comprehensive output, so a fully detailed report which has some dimension diagrams, both the front and side elevations. We can also add to the appendix any number of additional drawings because you might have a rear view where you've got signs mounted back to back. The performance classes are always identified, so it may be that you are designing to the wind classes from table NA2 of the 12899, so that would demand performance classes for the point load test, for the wind load, and so on, and they are identified. Now also important from that last bullet point was that sometimes fails are identified. So if you have an existing structure but a new sign would actually cause the structure to fail, then it will produce that report and you can very clearly show your clients, if you're working in that environment, that there will be extra expense. You can justify the extra expense because you can show, KeyPost will prove, will show the calculations that an existing structure will not take a larger sign, for example. So here's a nice little sign from a sign local to my house down in Bristol, where although KeyPost doesn't normally suggest asymmetric arrangements of the posts that you can see on that bus lane sign there, it does enable the movement, so you can test an arrangement very, very easily, and it will identify then the passes in the ringed box down the bottom, for example, and in the ringed box at the top of that report, that page there of the results, the temporary deflection due to bending, the TDD5 class that's maybe a little bit small on your screens. So the structural arrangements are output back to KeySIGN. There is this whole data transfer, so the geometry of signs taken from KeySIGN and the output passed back to KeySIGN. So very much that integration between the two products is key. So we can see here a town boundary sign. Of course, they're not all that common, but it is great when you've got that sort of situation that you can ensure that we're not just approximating to a larger rectangle. We've got a lower centroid because the center of that area will reflect the shoulders, if you like, of that sign having been removed. So integrated with KeySIGN, we will have exported the geometry and an image of the sign face, and on the right-hand side in that snapshot from AutoCAD, we have a summary of the post types and the foundation details, and a nice dimensioned image showing that sign imported back into KeySIGN. So let's have a little demo then. I shall just finish the PowerPoint slide here and pop back into the AutoCAD environment to start a small demo that gives you a good idea of the integration between AutoCAD and KeyPost, and also some tips and tricks. Now, one of the focuses for this presentation is the methodology for specifying the wind loading. I'm not going to go through defining a new environment, a new locality, but I just really wanted to point out how KeyPost manages that. And actually, once we've got that set up, sort of thing that you do first off when you're setting up KeyPost for the first time, you tell the system the kind of characteristics of your area, whether there's hills and embankments and so forth in the area, and what sort of general altitude it is. And after that, it is very, very easy to use KeyPost, and I hope to show that. So just bring up the KeyPost window first of all. When you first load it, it does invite you to either create a new proposal with this little start dialog, or open an existing proposal in case you wanted to go back and work on one. Maybe you've got some more information about the soil conditions there. So I'm just going to open up one which I have already designed. Go back to this sign from the traffic signs regs and general directions from TSRGD, and I'm going to open that up there. You can see we've got the passively saved lattice-based post there. We'll just center that more neatly within the environment here. Although the resolution of my screen is quite high, you should be able to see the dimensions to the side of the screen there. Incidentally, we have captured a number of other webinars, and we are shortly going to be publishing some tips and tricks videos which are only 3 or 4 minutes long, just to focus on a very specific area of KeyPost. So just with a focus on the wind loading, you can see down the bottom here there is a status bar, and you may be able to see a little map of England, of the British Isles rather, and actually says England inland down there. And the little reference to the right of that is BSEN 12899 Part 1. So I reference that as 12899 generally. So that is the wind load that has been used for this particular proposal. Now, one thing just to point out with the traffic light system on the left here is that we have a amber light relating to the overturning or the destabilizing of the structure overall within the soil. Now, we do get some nice tooltips there, so it's actually 99.7% to capacity. Little tooltip there that tells me that. There are a lot of safety factors, so I'm happy with that. It's very close to 100% capacity, of course, but within the safety factors, that should be absolutely fine. Just the amber light just gives us a warning to just check that. So we'll just go into the wind characteristics dialog here and have a look at what 12899 gives us. So you've got BSEN 12899 Part 1 as a wind load method. We could select here either a fixed wind load or Eurocode 1, of course, but with the selection that's there at the moment, the wind class here is WL6, and that gives us 1.2 kilonewtons, 1200 newtons per meter squared. And I just wanted to pop in to the table NA2 from which that has been taken. So we'll just bring that up on screen. This is a little extract from it taken from the training notes that we do for the day. So table NA2, the reference there NA2 is from the National Annex, gives us a very, very easy guide to select our wind loads depending on the area that we are placing our structure in. So one of the examples there you can see is the Scottish mainland, and I've ringed that as a value of 1.7 kilonewtons per meter, where the distance is greater than 5 kilometers from the shoreline. So that's looking up the column above. Looking to the left, this would be for any sign whose top edge is no greater than 7 meters from the ground level, and no less than 4, because if it was less than 4, then obviously we would go for the row above the 1.4 kilonewtons per meter there. So, of course, Scottish mainland does include a very widely varying altitude. So this table is, I'm catering for probably one of the highest altitudes that you might get in the Scottish mainland. And again, if I look at England inland, so again, the same column there, distance to the shoreline greater than 5 kilometers for a sign of the height of my town boundary sign, 1.2 kilonewtons per meter squared. That really is the worst case scenario for England inland, not coastal area. So I can actually refine that very easily by going for Eurocode 1 instead of picking my wind load from table NA2 of 12899. And the note down the bottom there really says that using Eurocode 1, BSEN 1991-1, Part 4, will generally result in significantly lower wind load. So let's just go and test that. I'll bring up KeyPost again. We'll just come out of the wind characteristics dialog there. And what I'm going to do now is just to select a different environs here. Now, of course, it is normal that the area that you're working with does actually determine the wind load. So for the Eurocode 1, you'll put in altitude, you put in whether it's coastal or not, and that will give you the wind load. So of course, I could have just selected Eurocode 1 from the dialog that I had previously been in. But I'm just going to pretend for a moment that this sign is is in this environment that I set up called Axley. I don't think that's a real place. And if I select that, we can actually show the details if we wanted to of this. It's actually 10 kilometers to the shore. There's a number of different items down here. But if I select that now, it will update some local factors within the proposal. And in fact, once the calculations have been redone, you can see that the destabilizing light up here on the left has now gone green. And that's because Eurocode 1 will be a much more refined area. It'll be a specific altitude or general average altitude that I put in, which I'm confident. And that's actually now giving me not just 1.2 kilonewtons, but half a kilonewton. So it's well under half, it's under half of the previous wind load. So that's going to enable me to come up with a much more economical structure. And in the case of these type of masts here, where there aren't very many within the range, it will almost certainly allow me to go down a size and save a significant amount. If you're just shaving off a few millimeters off a foundation, the savings won't be so great. And maybe with a generic steel post, of course, you just go down a size or two, and again, the cost won't be significantly different, but makes a very big difference where you're trying to make savings by using passively safe posts. So let's actually close this proposal and show you how there is an interaction between KeySIGN and KeyPost. So just now I'm going to pop back into KeySIGN. You can see the town boundary sign here, which I've got, and I can actually bring up a little image of that here. Not the largest of pictures captured from the street view. You can see there that it's got the roundel. So by removing the shoulders there, we have a lower area and a lower centroid. Now the forces that are applied, the wind forces are applied centrally, and there's a point load test as well, which is also applied at the centroid of the sign array. Now that is obviously in the case of two signs going to be somewhere towards the bottom of the yellow backed sign combination there. And just note also from this picture that you've got the two light units that are actually on the poles there. This is this is coming off a central pole, in fact, off the middle of the sign. It actually does look like those light units are coming off each of the left-hand and right-hand posts, but they are essentially taken off a post that is in the middle of the sign array there. So just popping back to AutoCAD, first thing we do is switch to the KeySIGN Tools tab. Obviously, the main KeySIGN tab is all about the design, and when we come to do use the tools, so things like the export to KeyPost, import back from the design, the structural design, then you will find those on the KeySIGN Tools ribbon tab there. Now, the tip today really, we talk about the round trip because that manages the data exchange. It manages the exchange of geometry out of KeySIGN into KeyPost and back, and that is done by way of a file. So if you had a colleague who was going to be doing the structural design, perhaps you're the structural designer and you take the geometry from your colleague who's perhaps in another on another desk or in another office maybe, and they will email you the files that are output, a little image of the sign, and of course all the geometry and the X height so that you know the overall manufactured height there. Now the round trip does make things very easy because it manages that whole file selection. Most of us spend a lot of our time browsing the file system. Where was it that I saved that file? So actually having that round trip really, really works. But normally, for those of you who've already used KeyPost, you probably use the round trip. You've actually closed KeyPost down, but I've actually only closed the proposal. You can see from the bottom here that KeyPost is actually still open, the yellow or pale yellow background there, the preview tab. But I'm going to use the round trip anyway because that does, as I say, it's a really good tip. It manages the file transfer. Now, wherever you're invited within KeySIGN to select a sign, for whatever purpose that might be, you are then prompted to select either the sign border or indeed the sign detail. So I can hover over that, or I can hover over the detail. So I'll just click on that. So I'm just going to call this ASH Ent, so ASH Entry, something like that. I put a little spelling mistake in there by mistake. I've got the double H there. You can see it's picked up the reference and it's picked up the shape. Well, it's not a rectangle, so it's some other shape there. There are some categories as well here. So it's a non-rectangular sign. You can see it's picked up the X height from the detail and the overall unrounded height and width from the geometry there. So I'm just going to click to export the signs. It takes a little snapshot of that, so just very briefly switches into a paper space layout so that we can get the right aspect ratio there of the sign, and then we are prompted to want to continue with KeyPost. Now, for those who are already using KeyPost in the round trip, you may not have seen this particular dialog. It says that KeyPost appears to be running, and of course it is. So I'm just going to continue with KeyPost. Now, Windows doesn't always bring the relevant window to the front, and this little message just says, just check your taskbar, and that probably means that KeyPost is ready and waiting. So I just clicked on the KeyPost task on the taskbar at the bottom of the Windows area, and you can see now I've got my new proposal wizard up, and it's telling me ASH Ent, the one with the double H that I put in there, the proposal name. So it's already taking me through the process. And this process involves a few things. Of course, we've got some details that we can put in, the proposal reference. I'm going to put in my demo or something like that, and a description there. So ASH Church Town Boundary sign. So you've got some details you can put in. We can see those coming through into KeySIGN later on. Another step in the process is to determine the location for it. So I'm going to go and pick ASH Church, where I've already created an environment. If anybody would like to have a look at that in the question and answer session, obviously I can take you through a little bit more detail about how to create your own environment. And another thing that one might want to do, of course, just referencing the image again, we have got the additional sign showing there. So it is possible at this stage to add some signs, and you have got a whole library of signs available to you. So let's just pop into that. I'm just going to go in here and maybe filter on the rectangle signs. You can see the little tree there, and we'll just go down, and I could very, very easily find my speed camera sign. Let's just see where that is. Quite seeing that myself, but so speed camera there. I can add that, and maybe even in certain situations I might want to control the order of them. So in this particular case, I'm actually going to remove that sign because I want to make a point later on. Now, this wizard normally comes with a couple of additional tabs, the supports tab. So at this point, I might be able to specify the supports that I want for my structure, and also a ground tab, and I may have some information about the ground as well. But you can see with the round trip method, this automates everything. It's nice and simple to use. In fact, the next step is automated. It's actually just clicked on the icon at the top here to go into AutoPost, and that's brought up the more simple dialog here. Now, I'm just actually going to close this and sort of take control of the automated round trip process. One of the great advantages of it is managing the file transfer, the geometry from KeySIGN and the output back into KeySIGN. I've really already taken a good advantage of that. But for today's presentation, I want to go into the advanced AutoPost dialog here. Now, this gives us an awful lot more control. So, for example, with the foundations, I might want to give some restrictions to the length or the depth of that. I might want to specify that I don't want to have any cylindrical foundations. So that's what is advanced about this particular dialog. So it does give you a lot more control, but I just want to focus on the first two. I do want to say something about the signs, and I do want to say something about the supports. Now, the first thing is that this is something like 1800mm mounting. It might be even a little bit less than that, but of course, you've got the opportunity to put in some numbers here. but I also want to put in some overhangs here. So I don't want the post to be pushed all the way to the outer edge of the sign. I want to make sure that there is a bit of an overlap from the post to the edge of the sign. So I'm going to put in a value of 100 there. Now that works really well if on the next page, the support page, I ask KeyPost to give me suggestions based on 2 posts at the maximum separation. So I'm going to go and add from the manager. Another little tip here. Now we have got some requirements for electrics at this point, so that's something that is going to be useful So we have got some requirements for an electrical supply here for the illumination. The regulatory sign will require that, and this particular sign is within 50 meters of a system of street lights. So little tip here, I will shortly be specifying the electrical housing. Down the bottom here, you should be able to see in the dialog behind this one, we've got a labeled item electrical housing, and we can also specify whether we want lights above each post or no post or whatever is our requirement. So a little tip for you here is to actually select posts without an electrical housing. Of course, in this particular arrangement, and that's a very common situation where if you do have multiple posts and you want electrics, you don't put a based post, a post with an electrical housing, on all posts. It will only be one. So essentially you have a mixture of posts. So rather than ask you to pick posts that have electrical housings and ones that do not, the tip is focus on the kind of post that you want. Really think about the diameter of the upper part of the post. Okay, so here we have a just steel round post of that particular steel grade, F355. So in this particular case, I want the electrical housing on one post only. So I'm going to select that item from the list down there at the bottom. And in fact, what I could do is I could say that I maybe want a post, a light unit on all posts, but we saw from the image that the light unit was only on the single central post. So I'm going to say there is no requirement for light units there. Now, of course, that single central post doesn't affect anything to do with the structure. If it was cantilevered, the extra weight might have, the extra mass, I should say, might have an effect on the post perpendicular to the wind forces. But probably what this does do is stiffens the sign in the vertical plane marginally, but we're really concerned about the deflection of the sign normally in the horizontal plane. So that's it really for the choices I want to make today, but do remember the tip that I was giving you. I have added posts with no electrical housing, but because of the selection I made, it's already telling me that I should have a section here of posts with electrical housing, and as soon as I click suggest, it's going to give me a warning. And the nature of that warning is that I have selected options that require posts with an electrical housing, but I haven't selected any. So it's telling me either select some, but it's asking me a question, would you like AutoPost to add all the available equivalent electrical housing posts for you? Do be careful because not all post manufacturers supply posts with an electrical housing. So if, for example, you're using the lattice-based posts, they don't come with an electrical housing, they just put a box on the back. A wide-based post does have some effect on the structure, but a little box on the back of the post doesn't. So if you are using the lattice-based posts, then just simply say that you don't want electrical housing, and that actually will come up with a structural design that is just as suitable. So I'm going to say, yes, please do add all the available equivalent electrical housing posts. Because I click suggest, it can now go away and have a little think about that, and it's come up with a number of suggestions there. So in the grid of results, I've got a little scroll bar on the right, so there are a number of suggestions there. That blue highlighted one is the one that it's drawn out. Now, there is no way that you can select in advance what sort of arrangement you want, where you want the base post to be. Now, if you've got 2, 3, or 4 posts, then it could be quite complex to actually tell it in advance. So you get quite a few choices here, and really they double up. So you've got a pair of choices. They're identical in every respect, except that the wide base post here, where you've got a selection of 2, is just one side or the other. where you have an arrangement with 3 posts, where it suggests 3 posts, then you would have 3 choices for each type. And what I'm looking at down here is that I've got the I and P, and it's a circular or a square arrangement. So these are now individual planted foundations, and if I have a look at the top down, you can see the difference between the shape. These are basically identical. In fact, I probably have 2 pairs of each of these, almost identical, but in one case I've got a circular foundation, cylindrical if you like, and in one case I've got the cuboid, in fact square in this particular case. So just looking then at the front again, I would probably go with this, maybe this arrangement here, and of course I can commit to that. And it's as simple as that. So what I can do is just mention that this is spread foundation. Yep, it will be geocode category 2 under Eurocode 1. We'll just center that so that we can see that a little bit more clearly. And very easy thing I can do now is I can export that to KeySIGN. So it's exported that. Just click the export button, blink and you missed it probably. And if I come back to KeySIGN, I can click OK, and then I can actually attach this by an OLE embedded object. Now this is a new feature of KeySIGN, and you can see very quickly that it now brings that design back in, all dimensioned up with the ground there, nice images of the ground and the posts and so on, and some information here about the display, about the proposals. I've got my proposal name, the reference, and the description that I typed in: Ash Church Town boundary sign. Obviously this gives an installer pretty much everything they need for the posts, except in this particular case, because there is a mixture of posts, the display that we normally use for the post model doesn't really accommodate a range of posts there. So we just mentioned for the post type, for the post model, see the separate report for details. So I'm just going to pop back into KeyPost and bring up the report here. Little icon at the top labeled report. Just takes a moment to compile all of the details for that and bring that up for me. So again, I'll just double click to bring that up into view. Perhaps zoom in a little bit on that so we can see that a little bit more clearly. So there are a number of inputs here. We've got the environs generally. It is located in England, but the general altitude was very tightly described as 40 meters, not the wide variance that one would get from using 12899. So if I pop to the next page, you'll see then that in fact I go to the third page here, that the wind load method at the top here you can see is Eurocode 1. That second page showed me the image of the sign and some of the other safety factors, mounting height and other inputs for the structure here. So a lot of calculations for the actual load that's placed on the sign. A couple of loads mentioned towards the bottom of that. The ultimate limit state and the serviceability limit state used for temporary deflections. The final load in kilonewtons is obviously based on the area, the shape factors, the slenderness ratio. A tall and narrow sign has a different slenderness ratio and force coefficient applied to a very wide but not very high sign. So a lot of different shape and modifiers, effectively factors that get applied to come up with the final wind force. It's used both for the temporary and the permanent deflections. So the report is needed to list the various different support types to add to the little image and the detail that's placed within the KeySIGN environment in the design drawing. And you can see here we've got 2 support types, A and B, and listed in the table below are exactly what support type A and B are. So there you go, we've got the dimensions of them available, and whether they are passive safety or not. In fact, support type B is, but support type A is no performance determined, class 0 there. So a lot of information about the support type. And let's just follow through quickly to the results page. We've got the results at the top there, and starting with both the point load and the wind load tests for the shear, for example, on this page. We've got some passes showing on that page, bending capacity, and if I pop through to page 6 of 7, We've got information about the temporary deflections and the permanent deflections for the wind load. In fact, temporary deflections are not required for a sign of this type. Okay, so let's just come out of the report and make another little point about this. Again, we've got this situation here where we're close to capacity, depending on the soil type, of course. That is probably unspecified here. So what I actually want to do then is add the additional sign on the structure here. Now, at the moment, we are looking at all the signs that have been involved in this proposal. These are the ones exported from KeySIGN. So I'm just going to unclick, if you like, tick on the little luggage tag there, and we can see all the signs that are available to us in the library. So again, hovering over the little branch structure here, I can go directly to the rectangular signs, just filter on those, and whiz down to the one that I want to show for this particular demonstration, speed camera sign. I'm just going to drag and drop that from the sign palette on the right there. And once I've dropped that onto the sign palette, then I have got this dialog that comes up. Now, of course, for most warning signs, it's going to be 600 or a 900, 12 or 1500, and we would put that height in there. Again, this is a standard sign, so I might want to put a specific height in that, but for most destination signs, it just comes at a specific height. So I'm just going to create that sign, pop it on there. Now, it isn't actually attached at the moment, so the signs are not all in the assembly, so that does give me free rein to move that around wherever I like. I'm just dragging that around now. So what I'll probably do is place it so that it doesn't impose on the edge, the distance to the edge of the carriageway for safety margins. And I'm going to right-click on that and attach that to the support. And as soon as it is in the assembly, a defined term within 12899, then you'll see that it does then become a valid assembly and all the calculations happen. So if somebody came along and said, look, we've got our 30 limit, but it's not really being well adhered to, so we probably do need to send out some speed cameras, maybe install some. Can we just put this additional sign on the existing structure? And that actually pushes it over various different aspects here. So we're now over the bearing pressure and over the destabilizing. So the extra area here has added forces that the existing structure can't take. But this is what I would just want to leave you with, is some refinement that really KeyPost deals with in very great detail. A lot of you may be thinking from the presentation, well, there's an awful lot of detail there, and actually the software does seem quite complex, and maybe I'm a little bit nervous about how I would find my way around it. So I'm actually going to maybe address that, because you do need sometimes to have the system accommodate the finer points of a structure and structural design. And a lot of you, I guess, like me, won't be structural engineers. Before I leave this proposal, I just want to point out, you should be able to see under the R of Ashchurch there in the sign, we could just only really see the vertical line of the centroid of the sign array. But if I was to move this down a bit, you can see how that centroid gets moved down. So eventually, actually, you can see that I could pull the centroid of the sign array really low down to attach that to the support. And in fact, because that centroid has been pulled down, we now have a little amber there. It's gone from 108% to 102. So the wind load and the point load are now being applied as if there was some kind of imaginary shrink-to-fit rectangle around these two signs, not the area of that shrink-to-fit rectangle, but the centroid is where the forces are applied. Because that's now quite a lot lower, the bending moment now, in fact, is quite a lot lower. So it's as if the force is not being applied at such a great long lever length as it was. So just by moving that sign down, I'm actually nearly making it safe. But KeyPost does have a fine point here with the wind characteristics dialog, and it's a checkbox here, a tick box that's perhaps not completely intuitively labeled. it's labeled Vary Wind Load with Sign Height. Now this essentially says, do I apply the wind load at the centroid of a sign array, or do I apply it individually at the center of each sign? So remember, this has now got an amber up here in the destabilizing traffic light to the left there, and it was 102%. It was originally 108%. And if I tick that box and say, yes, I do want the wind load to be varied with the sign height, then this goes back and it will give me 107%. I'm not sure exactly why that is quite as it was, but I think that was because I'm now, it was 108% when I had the speed camera sign there, yeah. So it's not gone back exactly to the 108% there, but it's certainly no longer showing me an amber. It is giving me a truer reflection of the situation here by applying the wind load and the point load at each individual sign's centroid. So a real finer point of the design there. It can mean that you can accidentally get a situation where you are maybe going for a structure that is very much too lightweight. And I can just show you very quickly that with this structure here, if I was to apply a small roundel onto the area here, so we'll just maybe put a speed limit sign onto this post here. Actually, let's just cancel that. So what we've got here, for example, is the support deflection is 29.9%. If I add a roundel on here, let's say it's 600, create the sign at that point. I'm just going to drag that around to the side, actually. And that's pulled the centroid right down. Going to center that onto the support. Very quick click there, and I attach that to the support. And now my support bending is, the support bending is 45%. And that's, I think it's because I've got the tick box here. I didn't, okay. So anyway, by pulling that centroid down, you might well artificially, the large area, we added a very small area to the two combined signs now by adding a small roundel there, but it has a very significant effect by pulling the centroid down. So almost certainly I'd want to have the wind load applied to each individual sign there. In fact, by doing that now, the support deflection is 30.5. I'm not quite giving the figures right there to make the demonstration, but certainly this is an important consideration there. So let's just pop very quickly back to the PowerPoint. I think all that remains me to do is to very quickly summarize the product here. So we've got a couple of images, I think, just to show some of the scope that we've got here. So obviously the very large signs with the planted foundations in a slope there, and you can see the ground conditions tell us exactly what the depth to the solid layer is, and there are drain tests or undrained tests, geotechnics fully catered for, and also we can work with profiles. So I've got another proposal I might just leave you with from KeyPost, which shows where one post is actually in the flat ground and the other post is in the embankment to the side of the road. The road is in cutting, for example. So using the orography to define the local ground characteristics, we can very quickly cater for those situations as well. So just in summary then, it is driven by all the standards that are key in this area. We've got the graphically based environment for doing the design, fully integrated with KeySIGN in terms of the geometry. Despite the sophistication, the complexity of it, the comprehensive nature of the software, after a while it does become fairly easy to use. So it is intuitive but very fully featured, and with the comprehensive report, the output there is nice and transparent, fully open, and as I mentioned, it is backed by academia and the standards bodies. We've had it cross-checked with an independent structural engineer who used finite element analysis software, which costs tens of thousands of pounds to back up the software. So a couple of sales things there. We've got some pricing options, obviously, we can give you. We'll be just contacting anyone in detail to see afterwards if you have any further questions, but happy to answer any questions now. So got one here, compatibility with BIM level 2. I mean, I think probably the interest with that question relates to the 3D aspects of BIM. In fact, we've got a project that's nearly finished, which will take a slightly enhanced output from KeyPost into the design environment. So it's probably going to be a KeySIGN tool anyway that will come to you very, very soon. That will actually, as I say, just effectively read the KeyPost database and draw out the 3D information so that it can be drawn in the CAD environment. So indeed, once that is actually available to you, you may still come back and ask what is the compatibility of KeyPost with BIM Level 2. And in fact, it will be a KeySIGN tool. It will certainly be a CAD tool to provide a full 3D model. So I think the answer is yes, it is compatible with BIM Level 2, KeyPost that is. But in terms of taking it on to model that in detail, KeyPost will probably rely on any add-on to the AutoCAD environment to provide that 3D model. Now there's another question here. Show how to put a separate sign on the reverse of a sign. So actually it's a very simple thing to do the signs on the reverse side. It is one of the bits of functionality that you have available to you on the right click. So you hopefully can see that right click menu that I've just accessed by selecting the sign and pressing my right button. And you can see there it's got the reverse mounting side. So if I just pop that on, you can see that goes on the back of the sign. Now, of course, it may be that this particular arrangement, and I'm just going to look at the back of this sign, means that the sign, whoops, I just have dragged that entirely out of it. So just let's detach that from the support. It may be that this sign actually goes on the somewhere on the support and doesn't change the area, but you nevertheless want to capture that as an image for the report. So let's just add that now, attach that to the support. So one thing you can do very, very easily there, if I just select it again, just to remind you, is to select the reverse mounting side item there on the right-click menu. Hopefully that answers the question. But it's something you can do. You can save the view, and I might just put reverse view for illustration or something, and then put something like manufacturer to determine channel spacing and type. That's a typical sort of thing. And if I go back now into the report, then it warns me that there are some custom images that are captured at one stage of the design process. Of course, the design might change. So then in the report here, I can whiz all the way back to the appendix. We've now got 9 pages there, and you can see if I zoom in, we have now got that, that extra image captured in the report. Then another question is, does the proposals work with a scheme that has multiple signs? So, yep, that's very much the case, and really just a very quick thing that I can do to answer that question is show a proposal that has that. I guess the questioner of that particular proposal didn't quite catch an image from earlier on, where you've got multiple signs on posts. Hopefully you can see an image of that now. Now it can be that you just simply export those signs separately from KeySIGN, and depending on the arrangement that you have within the design environment, you may have them to the left of each other, to the left and right of each other. So it is possible that you might want to change the arrangement of the signs within the KeyPost environment. So it can be done in a number of ways. You can actually get the signs in a way that is how you want them on site within the sign design environment, and then later just export them so that they come up within KeyPost in the arrangement that you want, or indeed, as I've just shown there, you can move them around to suit. So the proposals do work with a scheme that has multiple signs, but a little tip is don't try and export the arrangement that includes standard signs, because they are already included within the sign library. So another question there asked, are all passive posts available? Now we have got the posts listed much as the sign library. So if I just hover over the branch structure, you can see that there are a number of manufacturers that have felt free to give us their data. Some of the manufacturers have actually held back the data from us particularly ones, for example, where they don't have many in stock and they are normally made to suit. So they've given us information only about posts that they hold stock normally. One or two of the manufacturers didn't feel very comfortable, at least in the early days, to give us their data because they felt that by giving us the structural performance of the support, they were in some way giving away their intellectual property. We don't have any knowledge of how they achieved their structural performance, but one or two of the sign post data files are encrypted so that the manufacturer feels comfortable that they're not giving anything away. We do from time to time go and invite a range of people to give us their information. Not everybody is forthcoming, even though it is a little bit of a shop front for all of the sign support providers. So if there's something that's missing, then do get in touch with the manufacturer of the particular support and ask them to contact us or tell us that you want them to be included in KeyPost. And we're more than happy to do that. The more the merrier. As I say, some manufacturers have not been comfortable with letting us have their data. And a great question there. Hopefully the questioner is still with me. Can you snap signs to align with each other? So let me just go back and open that proposal that I had before. It's one of the exercises we do in training. There is a snap setting, so hopefully the question is still online. And if I go into the options dialog here, I'll just show you on the miscellaneous tab, there is it the miscellaneous tab? It's snap and drag. On the snap and drag tab, there is here a snap setting. So actually at 10 millimeters, it's normally good enough to ensure that the signs line up. And what I was just going to show is there is the setting. But if I detach that from the support and zoom right in, we'll just zoom right in on that. It centers on the zoom. Then usually that should be sufficient to enable me to snap them in detail. You can see it sort of jumps there, but I probably need to zoom in a bit more to be really confident that's happening. Let's just zoom in a bit more. But what I could do, of course, even if it's just temporarily on the snap and drag tab, is maybe set that to 30 mil. And then when I move this around, it will go in larger jumps. And of course, it may be that that sign below also needs to be moved so that it fits in with a 30 mil snap as well. But yeah, good question, well asked. Just have a little bit of an experiment on the snap and drag tab. The snap setting there, you can turn that off completely or put a value in to suit. So hopefully if you have a little play with that, you'll come back to me if it doesn't quite work for you. Okay, so very good question, well asked there about the creating an arrangement with uneven ground. That probably takes it to a level of complexity which may be too much for most, I don't know, but it is a situation that is not uncommon. So very good question there, and I'll just repeat that. Is it possible to run through how to create an arrangement with uneven ground, i.e. cut or embankment slopes? So in terms of a presentation which is just based on giving you a good idea of the scope of the product, keeping it fairly simple, obviously that was my intention, but I did show the image on the last couple of slides showing that simple slopes are very easy to do. But what I was going to show you here with this particular design here is that we can actually quite easily show a profile which gives us a little bit more complexity to the ground. Now the tip here, to answer that question in detail, just let me repeat it, to create an arrangement with uneven ground, where you've got a post that maybe in the level ground and some in the slope, it's a little bit different to just setting the ground to a specific angle. So we're actually using the orography setting here, and that's the tip. Now the main thing with this is that the slope here is all about the geotechnics, but the orography, the terrain, is all about the wind forces. So you can't really be using the orography to change the geotechnical considerations. The slope gives me calculations about whether the slope will slip, whether the foundation will push the ground out in an arc failure to push the soil around and out and up, the orography specifies how the wind is affected. Because obviously if I have my sign at the top of the hill, we've got a large area of open terrain and the wind can pick up over that. So this is why there's a difference between open terrain and terrain that includes houses and trees, because you get eddy currents and it tends to slow the friction, if you like, created by the uneven surface of buildings and trees, slows down the wind there and lowers the wind forces. Again, this is why there's a difference between a coastal sign or any coastal structure and one that is not within 5 kilometers or so of the coast. That open body of water, much like the open body of land or a sign at the top of a hill, allows the wind to pick up speed and for the forces to be increased. So orography is all about specifying the wind load, and the ground conditions are about specifying the geotechnics. So a little tip here is to show that you have an escarpment. I've just been really talking around this while the people still with me are evaluating the figures here. Hopefully you can see them. I've got the upwind length of the feature is 10 meters. So this is really telling me that the slope is 10 meters. The height of the feature is 3. So it's a modest embankment there, the road perhaps being in a cutting. I can determine the location of the sign, sorry, the orientation of the sign, which way does that face. And you can see that I've got the back of the post just about showing. It's a tiny little image here. It's a bit clearer on my screen here probably than yours, but I can determine the bearing of the feature. So although the slope is going up and to the right, because I'm looking at the back of the sign on the diagram behind, and the drawing area behind it's going up and to the left. And then the tip here is that the distance from the apex is a negative number. So if I put that as 1 or -9, you see it's going and jumps to 10, so I could maybe put this as -5 and put it in the middle of the slope. Then essentially I'm determining where that is for the actual structure in terms of the embankment. So -9 with an upwind length of the feature gives me about a meter, well it will be a meter for the centroid of the sign, the red cross that's in the middle of the sign by about the between the N and the O of Norton there, and that's a meter directly from the bottom of the slope. So that is a really quick run. I think the question was, is it possible to quickly run through how to create an arrangement with uneven ground? So to create a slope here, therefore, it is really a case of just using the orography to define the ground, and then in combination with the depth of the solid layer and whether it's a drained soil test and so on, then you can get what you need to both accommodate the geotechnics as well as really saying that, well, this sign isn't at the top of the slope. But there will be some effects there on the wind loading because of the orography at that point. So a very good question. I'm glad to have taken time to answer that. That does take me to the hour and a quarter. It's just coming up to 11:15. So I do hope that it's been an informative presentation for all of those who have joined me this morning. Very grateful that you can spend the time out of your busy working days to have a look at these presentations. Of course, some of the intention for the presentation is based around making sure that people who want to evaluate the software, perhaps thinking of a purchase, that they understand the scope of the software, how comprehensive it is, and how open and transparent the reporting side are. But also, we know that 1 or 2 people do take the time to attend the presentation, so that was my intention to add a few tips and tricks there. But always happy to answer questions at the end for those who feel that maybe they don't want to have the broad brush kind of sales approach to this. So thanks again very much for your time. Hope to see you soon, and we'll be advertising these further webinars in our e-newsletter going forward. So do please sign up for those on the KeySoftSolutions.com website. Thanks very much again.